The American businessman and philanthropist Bill Gates once said, "In the next century, leaders will be those who empower others." The Global Baku Forum's mission is to provide a platform for discussion among rising entrepreneurs, young professionals, and thought leaders. Young attendees at the forum gain a unique view through open and interactive discussions with distinguished personalities. We seek to inspire our next generation with a better understanding of the world. Welcome to the panel. Youth Speaks, We Listen. Empowering the next generation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I highly appreciate your applause. You know what's going on. We have established a very nice tradition ending up our very, very good 3 days discussions by youth panel. It's a great opportunity to listen to the young leaders, a very smart, brilliant group of young people, and they will talk about the future. The future we want to see and we want to be happy in. So the procedure is very simple. There will be 2 rounds of young leaders. They will be moderated by young leader. And then they will change without a break for the second group, and then it's over. It will take about 1 hour and a half, despite there is something different written in the program. So I have the privilege to give the floor to young leaders, and I'm very happy to be with them. Let's enjoy. Listen to the future.
Good afternoon. I have this great honor to welcome you all to the first panel of the 2. I am Klaus Milowska. I was one of the young leaders here on the stage last year. I'm also a co-founder of LAFIA Nigeria, and we work on reproductive healthcare in sub-Saharan Africa. I want to say that I'm very honored to hear so many renowned and experienced people around in this room. We heard what we should be doing for the future from people who had a chance to shape the world that we are living in right now. But I actually have to tell you that I think some of the most brilliant people I've met on these corridors are here on the stage. They're true powerhouses in their sectors, and they will not only tell us today how the world should look like in the future, but they are going to be the ones leading the change. So, we've listened enough. Now it's time to give the voice to the youth and actively engaged in what can be done. So we'll start today our panel on sustainable future, on financing sustainable development with William. William Wang is the founder and CEO of Tarragon Paragon, advancing the knowledge economy in emerging countries. He holds many degrees: Harvard Business School, the Schwarzman Program at Tsinghua University, Brown University, and New York University. So William, what are the critical industries or key factors that nations must focus on to achieve truly sustainable development?
Thank you for that insightful question. And I think this might turn to something that people don't necessarily expect, but when we talk about sustainable development, I think it's essential to shift to a vision of development that focuses not on the immediate future, but rather on decades or even generations. And I think 2 critical industries for many countries, not just the most powerful countries like the United States, Russia, etc., but rather advanced nuclear energy and space infrastructure. Nuclear energy provides a stable, carbon-free source for our global energy transition. It is among the safest energy sources today, and investing most critically in the next generation of nuclear technology, especially fusion, is critical. It is promising. In 2022, scientists achieved a historic milestone of a controlled fusion reaction. And in just this year, that time has extended to over 22 minutes, a remarkable achievement in just a few short years. Over 30 companies, billions of dollars, and many international collaborative projects have been working on making sustained progress in nuclear fusion research. And although commercial fusion power is not immediate, a significant sustained investment now would be critical towards unlocking this nearly limitless energy source for future generations. The second pillar is space infrastructure. Space technology already enables sustainable development on Earth today, from satellite-enabled climate monitoring to precision agriculture, broadband connectivity, and of course, the climate disasters. Looking ahead, space offers transformative economic opportunities, specifically with lunar mining and asteroid mining and lunar resource extraction. These contain abundant minerals and rare minerals and abundant metals that is sufficient for sustaining our global industries for centuries. And it would result in a significant easing of ecological pressures from conventional mining practices here on Earth. And developing these space resources will preserve Earth's natural ecosystem while fueling sustainable economic growth. And I think from a youth perspective, if we do invest in exploration, it will result in innovation, inspiring future generations to pursue the STEM field. Historic missions like the Apollo missions have resulted in acceleration advancements in microelectronics, which underpins modern technology today, and visionaries like Stephen Hawking and others have emphasized that our expansion into the stars serves as insurance against existential threats and ensuring our long-term survival. I don't think countries necessarily need to build their own nuclear power reactors and space missions today. Nations can work collaboratively and engage in regional and international collaboration, education initiatives, and global partnerships. They can position themselves within these emerging global sectors and ensure that they're not left behind as humanities move forward in these new frontiers. As an ancient Greek proverb once states, society grows great when old man plants trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in. Achieving sustainable development demands long-term vision, courage, and collaboration. By investing strategically today in advanced nuclear and space technologies, we can ensure prosperity, stability, and sustainability for generations to come.
That is fascinating, but let me bring you down from the space more to the reality here. The youth today, we are facing an overwhelming number of choices with education, with career option. There's so many directions we can go into. What challenges do you think that situation poses? And how can we best help guide and empower the youth to find direction and purpose amid all those options?
Absolutely. I think, as everybody knows, today the youth faces actually a paradox. So while everyone has more opportunities than ever for their careers, the abundance of this can fuel anxiety and indecision. As psychologist Barry Schwartz once mentioned, it is the paradox of choice, where too many options leave young people asking, what if I chose the wrong path? Am I missing out on something better? Social media has amplified these worries by showcasing endless successful stories, whether they're real or imagined, and this fuels comparisons and the fear of missing out. Rather than feeling empowered, many young people feel lost and overwhelmed. I think a very strong solution is to offer structured guidance, clear pathways. Singapore, under Lee Kuan Yew, offered an excellent model. In the 1960s, as a newly small independent nation, Lee Kuan Yew made 3 critical decisions. 1, to attract a global talent pool. 2, to build a meritocratic system, rewarding integrity and excellence in leaders. And 3, to make Singapore into a place of international commerce. This approach means building meaningful career paths, making sure these paths for the youth is more viable and trustworthy and drives sustainable growth and ultimately youth empowerment. An initiative that I'm working on with my company is we are working to help emerging countries and regions attract that global intellectual talent wherever they may be to drive that sustainable growth. An initiative also from a national front, such as the National Service Program, not only helps the youth navigate their many options, but fosters discipline, community, and ultimately a sense of purpose that many don't not necessarily feel they have today. Ultimately, youth empowerment means combining opportunities with more structure, more guidance, and I think it is your role as leaders today and our roles as leaders of the future to help young people turn these overwhelming choices that we all have into clear paths towards guiding impact, a lasting impact, and clear purpose.
Thank you so much, William. I actually will now move to Pascal Raffo, who is one of the young people who is making a lot of very good choices. He is the Chief of Staff at the De Jong Capital, a single-family office and emerging market special situations firm. He's also the founding partner at San Augustine Ventures, which is a frontier technology seed investing. and fellow and senior advisor at the Shafiq Gabar Foundation, fostering cross-cultural dialogue between East and West. Pascal, how should we, so easy question, how should we reimagine capitalism? And how can we inspire a better standard of living? No pressure, no.
Well, thank you, Madam Moderator, and NGIC eternally grateful. I subscribe to the Ubuntu philosophy. I am a person through others. My humanity is tied to yours. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. His first sort of architecture of capitalism was with an ethical rubric. And we have to return to a heuristics revolution within modern capitalism. Multi-stakeholder long-termism is about not only the shareholder, but the employee, the management, the neighborhood, the community, the planet. We have more stakeholders to account for. Modern capitalism has uplifted over 1 billion from abject poverty. However, over 1.2 billion of the poorest worldwide only contribute less than 1% in global consumption. We'll list over 60% of global income is tied to the top 10%. Nonetheless, we see the bottom half have less than 8% of global income. So what we're seeing at a macroeconomic level right now is nation-to-nation income inequalities are declining. However, at the country level, there is an increase of income inequalities. In the United States of America, for example, in a 40-year continuum, the stock market went up 4x. The CEO pay went up by 700%. The average American working wage stagnated at 12% over a 40-year continuum. So within this income inequality gap, many of today's modern sort of economic movements, whether that's moral, conscious, stakeholder, or inclusive capitalism, they're all interdependent. They're fundamentally focused on reducing human misery. This was the first objective of Adam Smith, to reduce human suffering. If our corporate entities, our business models, are not advancing the quadrupled bottom line, then we have a problem. We have to move beyond solely the profit maxim. We have to move toward people, planet, profit, and purpose. And so I think my generation really values the multi-stakeholder long-termism. And fundamentally, we have to control costs of inaction, of excess, of exclusion. We have to shape an opportunity economy, one where ownership is the norm, where upward mobility is the status quo, where the middle class rises and that the bottom half is not left behind. So again, I believe that multilateralism follows economics. When you have a stronger economic society, you can have a foreign policy. You can have a more robust security architecture. But the market economy must fundamentally lead to the personal economy. We have to get to savings. We have to remove debt. The burden of higher education debt in the West, in America specifically, is causing the inability to purchase property. This is something that the United States is deeply embedded with from a standpoint of suffering. Nonetheless, I think if we can return to the first vision of ethics rooted in fairness, equity, equality of opportunity, we may have moral market reforms that continue.
Thank you so much, Pascal. The values are very important, but realistically, it's also about the money and about financing. In your opinion, what thematic areas require augmented global investments?
Well, the SDGs are fundamentally an investment agenda, and there's a $4.5 trillion financing gap. So I think right now, if you look at the asset class of single-family offices, there's a combined $10.5 trillion of assets under management, whereas in PE and VC, private equity and venture capital, we only see a combined $6.5 trillion. We're about to experience the largest ever wealth transfer, over 84 trillion, when 2/3 of that is going to go to women. And so the household economics is going to change. So I believe that the family office, who's been hyper-focused on wealth preservation, philanthropy, education programs, has a role to advance and achieve the SDGs. And so I think we need to embed within this sort of a latent capital a new approach. Overall, I think there's a couple of interesting investment areas that are a little bit undertapped. We have an issue globally with counting the uncounted. There's over 800 million individuals without an identity. Identity biometrics needs to be a focus so we can get to personal banking, so we can get to voting. In addition, we're seeing digital communities. How do you monetize passionate digital communities? In the West, the majority of individuals no longer want to be engineers or doctors. You ask Gen Z or millennials, they want to be content influencers. So we can either exacerbate digital echo chambers, or we can monetize these passionate communities. And already we're seeing governments, we're seeing financial service firms really engage with these digital communities. And then the third area is longevity health. It's Yuval Harari who says that we're going to become more obsessed with our lifespan and our privacy data than maybe even our own currencies. And I think that's a stark warning of what's to come in a homo deus type of world. So the SDGs, they can be achieved. They can be achieved by tapping the dormant capital in the family office ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Pascal, for those insights. Thank you. We're going to stay on the topic of financing for sustainable development for a bit longer. I'll now introduce Milin Tanija, who is a strategy and economics professional supporting the UAE's public sector. He collaborates with senior executives on initiatives that strengthen Dubai's position as a global leader in finance, innovation, and sustainability. Milind, what are your thoughts on the urgency of the financing for sustainable development?
Thank you very much for that introduction. And as you mentioned, I am involved in sustainable finance, and my involvement in this space has been linked to COP28, which was hosted in Dubai. And I had the great privilege of participating in discussions around the role that Dubai can play in bringing financing for sustainability and sustainable development to especially emerging market countries. As you can imagine, these conversations were very insightful, and through these conversations, I chanced upon a very crucial realization. Financing fundamentally is not flowing to the sectors and countries that need it the most. The sustainability financing gap since 2015 has grown by 60%. And as Pascal mentioned, the gap currently stands at $4.5 trillion US. Many countries are diverting resources away from sustainable development. If we believe numbers, many developing countries spend more than 50% of government budget on repaying their debts, on repaying their loans, which means that they are not putting money into building schools. They are not putting money into building infrastructure for clean energy transitions. They are not putting money into providing basic healthcare facilities. This is a huge crisis for us. It is not just an economic problem, it is a human crisis that we are seeing because of a lack of adequate financing for sustainability and sustainable development. What this means is that if we're not tackling the issue of financing, we are jeopardizing the lives of many people. We are denying millions of people access to basic human services. We are denying people the access to economic opportunities. And we are essentially preventing ourselves from reaching quickly a future marked by sustainable development. So to answer your question, the urgency is very high. Now, over the past few days, we talked extensively about how developing countries are reshaping the global order. Developing countries are forging trade alliances. They are coming together to influence global markets. They are really at the helm of reshaping the global order that is being shifted up in today's day and age. Yet it's so surprising that only a small fraction of sustainability-linked investment flows into these countries, the countries that need them the most. This really highlights the urgency of the problem. Now, unless we take necessary reforms, and I'm happy to discuss them in a bit, unless we take the necessary reforms to transform the current financial infrastructure that facilitates the flow of capital into sustainability investments, we are not just putting these countries, these developing countries that we have discussed so extensively over the past few days, on a path that leads them to non-achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We are also leading them essentially to a path that puts them behind countries that may be prioritizing these issues. Because sustainability in today's day and age is an economic imperative. It is driving global trade, it is driving global foreign direct investment, and it is driving economic competitiveness. So yes, sustainability financing is at a stage where it is abysmally low. It is at a stage where it requires more support and the assistance of a financial infrastructure that focuses on developing countries.
So if I understand correctly, Milind, the urgency, the deadline for the financing is yesterday, as soon as possible. So then what do you think is, how can we unlock more financing to ensure that capital flows effectively towards it the most?
Again, the speaker before me, Pascal, mentioned that there's no dearth of capital. There's huge private capital in the market. To give you an interesting number, we have $450 trillion in private capital in the market, in the global financial market, in terms of financial assets that are available for deployment. The issue is these assets are not being driven into sustainability-linked investments. Now, there are several ways in which we can leverage interesting game-changing strategies and innovative financing models to ensure that the capital that is available for deployment goes into sustainability specifically. I'm a huge advocate for blended finance, which is a model in which we combine the powers of public capital and private capital to de-risk sustainability investment and put it to action. This way, we can unlock more participation from the private sector in addition with participation from the public sector for sustainability-specific investments. We also have green social sustainability bonds that developing markets can tap into. The issue they face, however, is that they lack access to debt capital markets. They lack access to adequate financing to be able to issue green social sustainability bonds. But with the help of multilateral development banks, we can make it possible for countries and issuers in developing countries to issue these bonds. Lastly, there is a group that is oftentimes neglected in conversations about sustainable finance, and that is SMEs and youth-led enterprises. Small and medium enterprises, youth-led enterprises, account for the majority of businesses globally. But these businesses that could be driving massive impact, massive transformation in the sustainability space, oftentimes face very strong financial constraints. We need to prioritize them in our dialogue to achieve financing for sustainable development.
Thank you so much, Milind. Now, we cannot talk about sustainable development without mentioning climate change. And that's with us to our next speaker, who is Leila Hassanova. She's my personal role model, and she's also currently chairing the Non-Aligned Movement Youth Organization and is continuing her mandate as a COP29 Presidency Youth Climate Champion. Leila has been an incredible part of a global movement of young people that are demanding urgent action on climate change. Leila, last year in your role as a COP29 Presidency Youth Climate Champion, you played a key role in championing the ambitions of greening education partnerships. In your view, what impact does amplifying youth voices at scale have on the partnership, and how important it is to, once again, finance climate education?
Thank you so much, Clau. I would like to thank NGIC for bringing us together and giving us a space to share our ideas and our suggestions with all of you, with the great audience here. Coming back to the question, well, first of all, I would like to note that Azerbaijan and UNFCCC Secretariat both serve as the advisory group of the Greening Education Partnership. And this alignment has strengthened efforts to advance climate change education and amplify youth voices. Notably, through that specific collaboration with members of the partnership, we successfully organized the COP29 Climate Change Summer Camp last year in Baku. And the driving force behind this initiative was us sitting together with the team and realizing that actually we cannot solve the crisis that we do not understand. Because main issue and main concern of young people was going back to the schools and universities where they graduated from, because there was no specific curriculum and teaching methodologies to teach those young people on what is climate change and what is the science behind it. The camp that we organized brought together 75 early career educators from 35 countries from across the globe. It was a step toward empowering young educators to integrate climate education into their teaching methodologies. Well, we young people are not just beneficiaries of climate education, we are critical stakeholders in shaping it. And our insights and lived experiences, they really help drive innovative approaches to education that are both impactful and relevant. I want to bring some statistics up here. Studies show that climate education can increase pro-environmental behavior by 30% and positively influence our day-to-day choices. Then why not investing in it and making our lives better? And only 40% of youth globally feel that they have sufficient knowledge about climate change and sustainability, highlighting the need for targeted education and outreach. Well, as my mandate says, children and youth have the fundamental right to be heard in decisions that shape their futures, and mainly including education. Ensuring that the voices are integrated into Greening Education Partnership strengthens its ability to deliver inclusive, action-oriented climate learning that truly meets the needs of future generations. Youth and children participation is important, but not for the sake of participating. It's important to be meaningful, and those young people who participate at such conferences as COPs and other conventions, they have to know what they're championing for. So investing in youth-led climate action, it's not actually charity. It's a smart economics. Everything that is spent on climate education and youth empowerment brings exponential returns in resilience and innovation.
Thank you so much, Leila. I actually have one more question to you about this. Yeah. What do you think are currently the biggest gap in climate education today, and how can we effectively address them?
Well, so many gaps and challenges, to be honest, but the main gap and challenge, I think, is accessibility, which is both in terms of funding and inclusivity. Many young people, especially in the global south, as I've mentioned previously, they lack the specific funding on education and on their efforts. Youth-led initiatives are worth investing for because they can drive change. I mean, we can drive change, and we can bring up very innovative solutions if we are given the proper instruments and support. And over the past year, when I was championing youth voices for COP29. We have held consultations, global, regional, and at global, regional, and local levels, where young people made it very much clear that they need more instruments, resources, and funding to drive the meaningful climate action. They also emphasized the importance of intergenerational dialogue, and this room is an excellent example of it. We cannot address the climate crisis if we do not join forces all together. Young people have ideas and solutions, but we need platforms and partnerships with policymakers, with decision makers, with those educators and financial institutions to scale up our impact.
Thank you so much. Well said. Now that we discussed climate change, we're going to move to another very important area that we just talked about before in the previous panel, about health. Eva Savidou is a medical doctor and emerging public health expert. She is an academic associate at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, focusing on public health and medical education, and a collaborator of the WHO Europe Regional Office. Eva, how can we strengthen the very important link between public health, primary healthcare, and also planetary health to ensure equitable access and long-term economic benefits?
Thank you very much, Clau, for the introduction and this important question. And let me start by saying that it's a real honor to stand here before you and to share this stage with these incredible fellow young leaders. So I'll start with a personal statement and a strong belief. I truly believe that health is the foundation of sustainable development, because without healthy people, healthy communities, and healthy environment, sustainable progress is not possible. Our economies, our societies, the future generations depend on a robust public health system, accessible primary health care, and an environment that nurtures our well-being. However, what we face is a crisis of fragmentation. So public health remains underfunded, reactive rather than preventive, and often isolated from the economic and sustainable agendas. So we need a paradigm shift, one that embeds public health and primary health care at the core of sustainable development. So my first point is that comprehensive public health and primary health care are a long-term investment, not a cost. To achieve true sustainability, we must develop comprehensive public health programs with both vertical and horizontal approaches. And what does this mean? This means strengthening preventive care that reduces the burden of non-communicable diseases, the leading cause of mortality and morbidity, which drain our economies and deepen inequalities. It also means ensuring sustained financing to guarantee continuity of care, especially in vulnerable and underserved communities. And it also means adopting an integrated approach that connects health, economy, education, and environmental protection. You know, investing in primary healthcare and public health is not an ethical necessity. I think it's an economic imperative. Every dollar invested in public health and primary healthcare saves multiple dollars in healthcare costs, boosts productivity, and reduces economic strain. And a healthier population means a more resilient and prosperous society. I would like also to make a second comment, to raise a second point, that I think that planetary health can be the connecting link in development policies. So in order to achieve a common understanding of what is planetary health, it's a solutions-oriented and transdisciplinary field, and also a social movement that focuses on analyzing and addressing the impacts of destabilized natural systems on human health and life on Earth. So we cannot discuss health in isolation of the environment. After all, we live in this planet. The environment and the planet is our big home. So the health of the people, the animals, and the ecosystem is deeply interconnected. And climate change, air pollution, biodiversity loss are not just environmental crises, they are public health emergencies. So if we want to build a sustainable future, planetary health must be mainstreamed into development policies. So what does this mean? It means recognizing that climate action is actually also public health action. It also means embedding health equity and environmental justice in all policies. And it also means strengthening cross-sectoral collaboration to address both human and ecological health. And the transition to a green, sustainable economy must be equitable, must remove barriers, and must empower people to be agents of change. So what must we do? 3 actions. Governments must commit to sustained investment in public health and primary health care as a pillar of sustainable development. Health should not be seen as a sectoral issue, but as a cross-cutting point across all policies, all agendas, and of course, global financing mechanisms. Planetary health must be systematically integrated into policies. Ministries of health, finance, and the environment must work together, not in silos, to create policies that address the root causes of health inequities and environmental degradation. And third, youth and all marginalized voices must be at the decision-making table. Sustainability policies must be equity-based, inclusive, diverse, and youth-oriented. We cannot afford token representation. Our participation must be meaningful. So, to sum it up, sustainability is all about ensuring life, a healthy, dignified, and prosperous life for all. The future is not guaranteed. It strongly depends on the decisions and the actions that we make today. We have the solutions, so why don't we act now? Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. I couldn't agree more that health is both the fundament for anything else we're doing and is so closely linked with development, sustainable development. On that second point, how can we ensure that sustainability and development efforts are truly transformative, creating lasting impact?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, if we are serious about making sustainability and development efforts truly transformative, I think we must ask, who is at the table? Whose voices are shaping the future we claim to build? Transformation does not happen in isolation. It is built on inclusion, diversity, equity, lived experience, gender responsiveness, and meaningful youth participation. And these are not just buzzwords. I think these are the foundation of real change. So without them, our policies risk from being detached from reality, disconnected from the communities they aim to serve, and ultimately ineffective. So I will again raise 3 points. The first one is that we should go beyond inclusion. We should ensure equity and a needs-based approach. So inclusion is not about checking boxes. It is about ensuring equity in the resources provided to the people and equality in the outcomes. Sustainable development must be needs-based, meaning it actively removes barriers for those who face systemic exclusion. That means ensuring women and girls have equal access to opportunities. Recognizing the rights of people with disabilities and designing policies that center accessibility. And protecting and uplifting LGBTQI+ communities, refugees, and other marginalized groups who often face intersecting vulnerabilities. My second point is that we should not ignore lived experience expertise. So for too long, decision-making has not been served for experts in experience. Those who live the realities of climate change, inequalities, health challenges, and economic hardships are often the least heard in the rooms where decisions and policies are crafted. So we need to recognize that lived experience is expertise. Policy making should not be about making policies for the people. It should be making policies with the people. A refugee navigating displacement, a young climate activist, or a person with disability challenging systemic barriers, they all carry knowledge that cannot fully capture in statistics or reports. So their voices must be informed, design, and lead the policies that affect them. And my third point is that youth are not just the future. We are the present. You know, it's a little frustrating and kind of disappointing to hear that the young people are the future. No, we are not only the future. We are the present. And let me explain what I mean. We are living and experiencing the impacts of action and inaction in real time. And we have lived and are living through multiple crises. Economic instability, employment insecurity, the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course the ongoing triple planetary crisis. So if we want a sustainable future, if we want true transformation, then you have to fully and meaningfully engage young people. Not just by inviting young people, not just by informing young people, or not just asking for their advice. Work with us, involve us, and include us in every step of the process. We know that change cannot happen overnight, and it's often a difficult and a long process. So if we want a better future for all, we must start building it together now. So let's commit to inclusivity that goes beyond representation, to policies shaped by those with lived experiences, and to youth engagement that is truly meaningful. If we want development that lasts, we must first ensure that it belongs to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, we have Celia, who I have the privilege to get to know and learn so much over the past few days. Celia Shretre-Aris is a multi-award-winning disabled government special advisor and lobbyist, and as well as policy and human rights legal expert. Celia has received multiple awards recognizing her work, being named the most influential disabled person in 2024, a Global Future Young Leaders Scholars UK delegate, and named as the most influential disabled person changing law and policy. Celia, Eva mentioned before equity, and I'm very curious to hear what are your thoughts about equity and how can we maybe shift our mentality from equality to equity?
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction. I think the first thing that I want to say is, to me, one of the biggest assets, if not the biggest asset that we have in this entire world is people. There are over 8 billion of us, and 2 billion of those identify like me as a disabled person. We heard Eva there talk about health, and we've heard that consistent message across the entirety of the summit, which has been incredible. But I fit into that category of the 2 billion people that don't have that privilege of having my health. Not to get emotional about it, I have a terminal illness. I'm dying. That's flat out how my story is. That's how I live every single day, with the threat of my health weighing over my head. And it influences every single thing that I do. Sustainable development, the key to the future, is investing in our people. But we can't forget about 20% of those people. Often when I tell people my story about how I live and the challenges that I navigate, and you'll notice a bag down on the floor by me here, that's not a handbag. That's a tube that I have a blood infusion every single day in order to survive. And I hear this word equality all the time. We want equality, we want equality, we want equality. I don't want equality, I want equity. And people get very confused when they hear a young person say, I don't want equality, that's not what I want. The scenario that I always use to describe this situation is, all of you in this room, I'm going to give you a free pair of shoes. You don't have to pay for it, and you're going to get them right now. But I'm not going to ask you what color you want. I'm not going to ask you what size you are. I'm not going to ask you what shoe fits you the best and what you find most comfortable. You're just all going to get the same. That's equality. What we need for sustained growth is to move to a place of equity, where before that, I've got a wide variety in front of me, and you can make your personal preferences. You can tell me what you want. I'm still providing for you. We're all still getting the same pair of shoes, but it works for everybody. Sustained growth only works for our people when it allows for individuality within society. There's a great model that we use to say medical model and social models. Currently, right now, we're very much living in a medical model, and it's recognized by the United Nations that we need to move towards this social model. Everything is about curing people. Everything is about treatment. Everything is about medicine. Everything is about putting things in progress so that we can make sure that people don't get ill, because this is a bad element of society. People are always going to be ill. Unfortunately, cancer is always going to be there. It's a natural part of humanity. 80% of disabled people aren't born with their disabilities, they acquire them. There's this big misconception that everyone who has a disability is like me, that's been born with it. It's not a case of if, it's a case of when. We are an aging population. So what we need to do is, rather than blaming disabled people saying, you're the problem, the reason you can't do things is because of you. It's not because of me. It's because the society around me hasn't allowed me to live in a world that flourishes. I live in a society that isn't built for me. And sustainable growth, to me, looking at that word equity, is building a society that dismantles down the barriers around me. It doesn't dismantle down people. We have to build policies that allow space for individuality. The one thing we all have in common is that we are all different. And we cannot create political, legislative, and policy systems that don't allow for that. And that's how my answer in building sustained growth.
Thank you so much for such powerful words. I have one follow-up question about, in practice, how can we ensure that accessibility is actually a cornerstone of policy from the very point of design?
I think I have quite an easy answer for this, and it's, again, something I lived through my entire life. I ask each of you, in your own head, quickly to define these words: racism, homophobia, transphobia, sexism. We can all do that pretty easily because we live in 2025. I'll ask you to define ableism in your head. How many of you actually heard that word before, or ever stopped to be taught the definition or go and teach yourself the definition of that word? We live in a society where we have the systems around us, we have the people around us telling us what we need, telling us what we need to do, but we aren't listening. And why is that? Because people like me are met with sympathy, we're met with empathy. My entire life I've been told I will do nothing and I will go nowhere. When I was 14 years old and they told me I was going to die at age 16, do you know what I was told by my school system? We think it's time to leave. And effectively what they were saying was, go home, go to your bed, and wait to die, because there is nothing that you're going to contribute to this world. And every single day when I turn up to work, I always joke and say my aim in life is to make myself redundant, because there shouldn't be a job where someone has to fight for their basic humanity in 2025. We look around the cities around us, something so simple to other people as a lack of a dropped curb or no wheelchair access. 98% of the global websites, of the top 100 websites, deemed to fail United Nations standards on accessibility. 98% of the internet is inaccessible to 2 billion out of 8 billion people. We have to talk about this. We have to elevate this conversation to the same level that we have a conversation of racism, sexism, homophobia. Why are we not up there in this conversation? It baffles me. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is there, and it stays to this day the fastest ever signed charter in United Nations history. But why don't we know about it? Why aren't we implementing? Why aren't we doing something? There's a great quote that the life of the, it's quite a depressing quote, but it is a very good quote, I promise, that the life of the dead is the memories of the living. I'm still living the same life of the memories of the people that came before me, because the progression that we have seen in terms of the rights of people like me is moving so slowly. I hope that in 20 years' time, I can sit back and say, this will be a memory now for the generation that come after me. But unfortunately, we aren't moving at the correct pace. As Eva was saying, we have to listen to the voices of the lived experience. The biggest asset in life is people. Accessibility is a fundamental human right, not a privilege. And that is something we all have to remember, is human rights are not a privilege. They are something every single one of us is entitled to. And there should be no exception to that. Health equals wealth is not a sentence I ever want to hear in my life, because it puts people like me down and out. And there's a great quote from Francis of Assisi, which I always quote, is, start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. I am quite literally impossible. I shouldn't be alive right now, but here I am. And I hope in what I do, I prove the fact that all of us have possibility. All of us have something to contribute, and we should listen and respect every single person.
Thank you so much, Celia, for such powerful words and bringing us here to the center. Actually, before we finish this part of the panel, there's another one later. Before we finish this part of the panel, it's about people. I want to be sure we make a pact. I'm going to ask each of these panelists to tell us one key thing they would like to see happening in the world to drive the biggest change. But similarly, what I expect from you is this entire week we've been talking about listening to the youth voices. And here, quite literally, we're going to be asking one actionable thing. If you would like to listen to what the youth has to say, this is going to be a short and concise instruction action guide for all of us to go and lead. So I'm going to start with William. I'm going to repeat the question. If you could see one key action take place that would drive the biggest change in your sector, what would it be?
Thank you. I think I'll focus a little bit broadly. Firstly, one, this panel is about sustainable development and sustainability for the future, but there's increasingly no shared values and experiences among the next generations. We're stuck in our echo chambers. We're looking at our own communities, but not really focusing on a collective vision that society, that even within one's country have. So I offer a simple but powerful challenge that we should build a service of service. I want to reference a science fiction book, Starship Troopers. In that society, a clear distinction is between the civilian, those who reside within the system, and citizen, those who earn their rights through service to the nation. Everybody is born a civilian, but everyone is offered the choice to earn their citizenship through federal service. Service guarantees citizenship. While I don't suggest we necessarily adopt that model exactly, its core principles resonate, that something that is given has no value. And when we vote, we wield political authority. We're using force, and that is the supreme authority from which all others are derived. And the right to wield that authority should be earned. In this fictional framework, we've seen that now in historic reality. In ancient Rome, non-citizens earned their citizenship through military service, forging deeper loyalty to the nation, and leaders pride themselves on this service. Across histories, great societies have thrived in the spirit of service and citizenship, while those that have replaced their citizen soldiery with mercenaries have saw civic pride unraveled, civic participation taken for granted and is devalued. And in our modern times, I'm reminded of US President John F. Kennedy's call to ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. A national service program would give our youth a pathway into that civic participation. Personally, I joined the ROTC, our Reserve Officer Training Program, last year during my education at Harvard, because I wanted to, this is one of the pathways of becoming a military officer in the United States Army, because I wanted to earn my role as a citizen. That experience affirms my belief that membership in the body politic must be grounded in responsibility. It must have duty and service. We must guide subsequent generations with discipline to strengthen our social fabric and to instill a willingness to sacrifice, to put a greater good ahead of oneself, even indeed at the cost of one's life. And such experiences, I think, will be critical to fostering compassionate citizens who will recognize that service to a common good is responsible. And so my call of action is very simple, that we should unite to make service more of an honored rite of passage in society, one that we don't have today. One that instills a more responsible and martial culture where our youth are instilled with that purpose, that duty, and that honor to each other and to a greater good, something larger than ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Pascal, the same question.
I mean, economic liberalization is well underway globally. A contemporary Greek poet, Dinos, says, "They tried to bury us. They did not realize we are seeds." This is the motivation of our generation. We believe that there are fair development pathways. A living wage is mandatory. This is relative per region and state, maybe even at the local level, but a living wage has to be a part of the conversation. Secondly, we have to expand funding for multilateral and public funding. Third, I alluded earlier to the dearth of private capital in the family office space and the imminent transfer of wealth. There's new values that can harness that capital to create tangible impact. Fourth, we need to revise the sovereign credit rating system. And fifth, sustainable development is a high return activity. Now, it's oscillating when you get to the brass tacks. Nonetheless, economic interdependence will lead to human flourishing.
Thank you so much. Milind, the same question.
During my previous responses, I tried to evoke the notion that sustainability, sustainable development transcends the boundary of just an environmental imperative. That is what most people understand that as. But this panel did such a wonderful job of describing that sustainability. In my speech, I mentioned it's an economic imperative. This panel really highlighted that it's also a moral duty. It is a way for us to deliver on the need for addressing, for example, the burden of disease in many countries, the need to provide access to peoples of determination. Sustainability is the mechanism through which we can deliver on all of these requirements. And I think the biggest action we can take is we need to see it as an imperative, an economic imperative, environmental imperative, and as a moral duty above anything else. And in my previous responses, I highlighted innovative models that we have in the market, blended finance, green social sustainability bonds. That's all great, but the moment we realize that it is really the only solution we have for a prosperous future for everybody, the financing will come through these innovative models. So advocacy for seeing sustainability as an imperative is the action that I would prioritize with immediate effect.
Thank you so much. Leila, please go ahead.
Before I answer to the one key action, I want to bring one key question that I also have and always ask myself and my peers. Why is less than 2% of the global climate finance reaching youth-led initiatives? So, if I could see one key action, it would be definitely ensuring that youth-led climate education becomes a global priority and is backed by relevant funding that is needed. And this is not just solely about education. It's about ensuring that we meet the SDG 4 and SDG 13 and put young people at the heart of these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eva?
Yeah, thank you. And I think the answer is pretty easy and straightforward for me. And it's actually what I'm striving and I have been doing for the last over 8 years through my voluntary roles in diverse national and international organizations and ultimately in my role in the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, the global one and our regional one for the Black Sea region. And this true, meaningful and transformative youth engagement. So my key action is no more token seats at the table. Make participation real. Put young people, marginalized communities, and people with lived experience in positions of real power. Give us the tools, the resources, and the authority to shape policy. Action and transformation start with trust and us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Celia.
I want to say 2 answers to this question. I'm going to cheat slightly. My first one is, if something makes you feel uncomfortable, get comfortable with it. Because something feels uncomfortable because we haven't spoken enough about it. So if something's making you feel uncomfortable, get comfortable with it. That is a massive signal to you as a change maker, as a policy maker, as a legislator, as a great thinker, as an academic, that we are not speaking enough about something. And my second point is around shared burden of responsibility. The onus historically has always fallen on those directly affected to constantly have to advocate, constantly have to call for change. Those that care about climate change are carrying that flag on their own. Those that are facing racial discrimination are carrying that flag on their own. Sharing that burden of responsibility and understanding that as a global community, we all have to share the burden of conversation and responsibility in creating change. There's a great expression, nothing about us without us, and I caveat by saying there is a massive difference between allyship and taking the voice away from somebody who deserves to have that spot on the stage. Show your allyship, show your support, but always make sure when that moment comes for real, tangible change, that you are opening up that floor and allowing that representation from communities such as mine, which historically have not allowed to share that place of voice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I did not lie to you. These are incredible powerhouses, and I'm glad that you had the opportunity to learn from them the way I've been learning from you this entire week. That's not the end of the entire session. Sustainable future requires thoughtful global governance and security. In the conversation a few days ago with Madame's First Lady, Yushchenko, we discussed that you cannot build a future without good institutions. And the next panel will be discussing exactly that. So please stay in your seats. There's another panel going after this short break. Thank you so much for listening.